Hi, and thank you for joining. This is part 3 of Mortimer Goes with the Flow, book released through Pisces Rising Press. We are going to be going through a few of the pages. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I think we're going to be hopping around quite a bit on the different pages, and I guess focusing sort of on workflow, or if you want to look at it another way, lack of workflow. I am not that well versed in Photoshop, to be honest, and I think a lot of people could probably tell just by looking at sort of the redundancy that goes on here. These were done quite a while ago, but everything's a learning experience. I got the book done, so I guess the next one is going to be a lot easier. If you have not seen the previous episodes, I just wanted to run through some of the stuff that I do. Essentially, I draw digitally in Photoshop, and I scan in physical watercolor swatches. I basically plop down all these different colors and scan them in at 600 dpi, which gives me the flexibility to expand or shrink down. Obviously, shrinking down is not that big of an issue, but when you start to blow things up, that's when your resolution really comes in handy. So here we go. I'm basically just plopping in the color swatches in behind the character. This is Mortimer. He is a grumpy fish, even though he doesn't look that bad today. He's looking fairly happy, and that's because this is sort of midway point of the story. He starts to see that things are not as bad as he is accustomed to. These are physical swatches, as I said, in the back, and I am cutting them out. Always been a big fan of linoleum cuts, and perhaps one day I'll get back to it. But as of now, I like to use the eraser tool and just cut out my figures. I like the texture that the paper has given, so this is a big plus, because I think that, when you start to paint digitally, at least for something like this, it kind of comes off a little sterile. To be honest, I think the drawings themselves, as loose as I kind of wanted them to be, there's still that little edge of, it's pretty crisp lines. Try to fabricate a brush that was a little bit more organic, and sometimes it comes off a little too refined, but nonetheless, perfect is the enemy of the good, as they say, and I'd rather have something good that's finished than perfect and constantly being worked on. At this point, I am simply just cutting out the color for his eyeballs, and later on I kind of realized it would be better if I just painted them white on a separate layer, because once you start cutting things out and you start moving things around, as you see, the blue is showing up behind his eyes now. Should have just painted it white. The color swatch for the blue was actually a pretty big thing. Throughout the book, the color of the water changes, and that's to reflect sort of his realizing that fighting against the current isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Sometimes it's good to just go with the flow. Go see what is downstream, and life can actually be a little bit better. I had a lot of fun working on this book. It was a big departure from having just something that was so structured and so rigid, I guess. There's certain pages, as you can tell, something like this, I could have painted the background, I could have painted the rocks in the back, but I just felt, nah, leave it alone. Leave it as like an ink blotch. I like touching up the edges just to sort of clean them up. Sometimes when you scan them in, it gets a little bit rough. It's a little too much of that texture that comes through, and I find it a little bit distracting, and when you print that up, it actually stands out quite a bit. This is going to be going through a printer that we've dealt with quite a bit. Colors, I gotta say, are pretty good. They're very accurate. And that's the number one thing that a lot of people complain about. I know I had friends that were colorists for comic book companies, and every time I would get an issue, I would hit them up, say, hey man, great work, and they would always say, no, you should have seen it on the screen. Printers never get everything 100% correct, and I do agree. Even though I'm a big fan of the printer that we use, it's very close. It's not 100%, but I'm definitely satisfied with how the colors turn out, and the textures definitely come through. There's a lot of different competing printers out there. You're going to find some that you love, some that you don't love as much, but just give them all a shot and pay attention to where that printer is. I know with CreateSpace, they have several printers around the country, and certain ones I hear are better than others. There's one in South Carolina, I believe. There's one, I think, in California. But just when you get the sample, take a look, see where it was printed. If you like that color, perhaps you can request it. They have great customer service. I'm sure they would try to do whatever they can to accommodate your request. Again, just cutting out Mortimer here. I had placed text where I thought it would generally be, just to give an idea as to, you don't necessarily need to paint all the way up to the lines. For this one, we certainly did not get too crazy. We just kept it in the same spot at the bottom of the page. We just feel that for something like this, it's a pretty simple, straightforward story. It doesn't need to get too wacky. Text, fonts, all that stuff did not need to be outlandish. I used guidelines. I have basically used a template that I had constructed based on parameters of an 8.5 by 8.5 book. For those wondering, the size of this canvas is 17 by 8.5. The final book is going to be 8.5 by 8.5 with no bleed. That actually means that there is no white border when you get the final book printed. I chose the 8.5 by 8.5 dimension because if you look at a lot of the books that small kids have, they're very square. There's something to me very comforting about the squarish format. I've always enjoyed it. I think it may go back to Japanese woodblock prints. I'm a big fan of those. Hokusai is definitely the most renowned one, even though there are incredible people throughout history. Even now, Mr. David Bull, his work is phenomenal. Definitely check him out on YouTube. He's got incredible pieces. So here we go. We're just like having some fun with like action lines. And at this point, I sort of realized that drawing in white is actually a better alternative than actually erasing. I am curious about how you guys work. How many of you decide to go the traditional way and just draw everything by hand? I know Copic markers are a huge thing. I don't have any Copics. What I do have are the Winsor & Newton brush markers. I think they're phenomenal. I like them a lot. I also have a pretty good amount of the Artist Loft from Michaels. Have a good time with those and just enjoy drawing. Well, that about wraps it up. Please subscribe. There are quite a few of these coming up with this particular book and then on to the next assignment, which I'm really looking forward to. It's going to be a little bit different in terms of execution and style, so I got to get a little bit boned up. I'm sure I'm going to be filming a lot of the process of getting back to a more traditional sense of illustration. Thank you so much, and once again, be like water, my friends.